Outside the car window, the shadows of trees swayed in the wind. Inside the car, under the dim streetlights, two intertwined flames were reflected. A man's deep and magnetic voice spoke.
First time?
MM.
Before Sarah could respond, David sealed her lips with his. Hours later, it was already dark. Sarah tidied up her clothes, ready to leave. Just as she was about to step out of the car, David pulled her back, clearly not quite satisfied yet.
That's enough. I have things to do. Goodbye. Oh, no, I mean, never see you again.
Ha! We will meet again.
He let out a cold laugh and released her hand. Sarah just wanted to leave quickly. Since Jonathan got involved with her shameless best friend Emily, she wanted him to taste the bitterness of betrayal. Emily was Sarah's college classmate and her best friend. They shared everything, including her relationship with Jonathan. Jonathan was the young master of the Smith family, a leading enterprise in the area. His status alone was enough to make Emily drool. Jonathan embodied all the flaws of a rich second-generation heir. Apart from his good looks, he was utterly useless. It was only because of the arranged marriage between their families that Sarah got engaged to him. After they got together, he did change a bit, reining in his wild behavior, though it was mainly to secure his family's inheritance. But on the day of their engagement, Sarah discovered his affair with Emily, which was utterly disgusting. Dragging her exhausted legs, Sarah finally made it home. Just as she was about to enter and rest, Jonathan pulled her back, exposing the marks on her collarbone.
Stop! Tell me where you went after the engagement. Why are you back so late?
Nowhere, there was traffic.
Who are you trying to fool? Look at you, all seductive. Did you do something shameful? We've been together for over a year, and you never let me touch you. Where did these marks come from? Do you think I'm blind?
Jonathan, who had cheated first, now wanted to accuse Sarah. She took out her phone and showed him the intimate video of him and Emily.
Deleting it won't help. Haven't you heard of cloud storage? If your parents or even your grandfather find out, do you think you'll still get a share of the Smith family's assets? But don't worry, as long as you don't provoke me, I won't expose this.
The reason Sarah didn't confront Jonathan about his affair with Emily was that she wanted to use her status as the Smith family's daughter-in-law to leverage their reputation and connections to help her family's business, and maybe find out why the Johnson family was on the brink of bankruptcy.
Fine, you're tough.
Jonathan spat out and stormed off. After he left, Sarah finally got some rest. After a shower, she lay in bed, scrolling through her phone when a friend request popped up. The profile picture was a flower, and the name was David. Curious, she accepted.
Hello.
Who are you?
What? You were so wild in the car earlier, and now you don't remember me? Need me to remind you?
So his name was David. At that moment, Sarah realized her impulsive act might have caused a big problem. Since her fight with Jonathan, he hadn't come home for days, probably with Emily. Meanwhile, she couldn't stop thinking about David's handsome face. One day, on her way home from work, Sarah received a message.
Let's meet.
It was from David, along with a location. After much hesitation, Sarah went to the bar Enchanted Night, David's usual spot. That night in the car was so dark she didn't get a good look at David's face. Now, she could see his chiseled features clearly. He was not only handsome but also had a hint of coldness and a perfect physique.
So, what do you want for sleeping with me? Money? A car? A house? It can't be those. Your fiancé might be useless, but he should have those covered. Did he put you up to this?
Of course not. I don't want anything from you. It was a moment of impulse to get back at my fiancé. So please, don't tell anyone. Otherwise, I might lose my status as the Smith family's daughter-in-law and get in trouble with my parents.
Ha! Interesting. You don't want me to tell? Let's play a game.
David walked over, pinched her chin with his long fingers.
What game?
David wanted to keep Sarah as his mistress, threatening her with the video from that night. She had no choice but to comply. Shortly after she left, David sent her an address and a code, clearly the door lock password. She memorized it and deleted the message. That evening, Sarah wore a long-sleeved tracksuit to cover her figure and arrived at the address Imperial Garden. I took a deep breath at the door, adjusted my breathing, and then entered the code. The door opened, and I slowly walked inside. The house was large, a spacious flat on the 26th floor with an unobstructed view through the large floor-to-ceiling windows.
Oh, right on time, huh?
Hearing this mocking voice startled me.
What are you afraid of? Feeling guilty?
Coming here in the middle of the night, of course, I felt guilty. I forced a smile.
What are you wearing? On purpose? Afraid I'll see? What haven't I seen already?
Hearing this, a faint blush spread across my cheeks.
I don't know why you called me here.
What do you think? What else could we do?
David rubbed my waist with his slender fingers. I knew what he wanted without him saying it, but hearing his words made my face heat up, the warmth spreading from my cheeks to my ears. David completely disregarded my feelings, tearing my tracksuit to shreds as if it had wronged him. He embraced me from behind, planting delicate kisses on my neck and shoulders. I didn't respond, but he wasn't angry, continuing to kiss me slowly, not even sparing my fingers, as if he wanted to consume me entirely. Hours later, I felt like I had died once, looking at the shredded clothes on the floor, wondering how to leave. Just then, the doorbell rang. I immediately curled up in the blanket, afraid of being discovered. I heard a voice say,
David, close.
Shortly after, I felt something land on the blanket.
Get dressed and get out.
His attitude changed so quickly. I dressed in the clothes he had thrown at me as quickly as I could. They fit well, but the fabric was a bit scant, making me feel a bit chilly. If I came here cautiously, I left in a panic.
David. You jerk. You have no idea how to treat a lady.
I finally made it downstairs, only to be stopped by someone.
Sister-in-law, I'm David's assistant, Michael. Don't worry. I'm on your side. David asked me to take you home.
Michael was quite talkative. After I got in the car, he kept asking if I was okay, as if afraid he hadn't taken good care of me. He talked non-stop the whole way, and I barely said a word. Michael dropped me off outside Jonathan's villa, thoughtfully opening the car door for me. Seeing me shiver, he took off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. I looked up and saw Jonathan's car parked at the door, feeling a bit worried. Michael noticed my unease.
Sister-in-law, I'll wait here. Call me if you need anything.
Before I even got inside, Jonathan rushed out, with Emily following behind. Jonathan looked me up and down.
Coming back so late? Where have you been? It's almost morning.
Sarah, this is your fault. You're already engaged to Jonathan, yet you stay out all night. How could you do this to him?
I glanced at Emily, not wanting to talk to them, and tried to walk past them into the house. But Jonathan grabbed me, and Michael's jacket fell to the ground, exposing the revealing outfit I was wearing. Smack. Jonathan slapped me.
Whose clothes are these? Who are you trying to impress, dressed like this in the middle of the night?
Before I could react, Jonathan was kicked to the ground by a sudden figure. It was a hard kick, and Jonathan cried out.
You hit women? Have some shame. The clothes are mine. If you want to fight, fight me.
Seeing this, Jonathan realized he couldn't beat Michael and didn't dare to make a move. Jonathan was helped into the house by Emily, cursing all the way. I nodded to Michael in thanks and went inside. Once inside, Jonathan naturally wouldn't let me off, especially with Emily adding fuel to the fire. Jonathan wanted to break off the engagement.
Without me, you wouldn't get the Smith shares.
Jonathan had agreed to the arranged marriage with me because of my talents. With my help, he had secured his position in the company.
Fine, Sarah, you win. But don't regret this.
Jonathan said, holding Emily as they went to their room. Soon, I heard Emily's shrill screams, clearly audible because they hadn't closed the door. They were doing it on purpose. Surprisingly, I felt calm. Although I had been forced into this engagement with Jonathan for family reasons, I had hoped to make the best of it. Despite our ulterior motives, we were supposed to live together, and I had developed feelings. But now, it all seemed futile, and I felt nothing. Maybe I had fallen for someone else? No, impossible. How could I love David? It must be that I never loved Jonathan, so I could be so indifferent. Soon, the noise inside died down, not because they closed the door, but because they were done. I checked the time, 10 minutes. Interesting, my stomach churned. Before leaving, Jonathan told me that his grandfather had arranged a dinner to welcome his uncle back and that I should be at Ocean View Tower by 7 p.m. Since my family's company had declined, I had been reluctant to attend Smith family gatherings, but reality forced me to go, as I was Jonathan's fiancée. In the evening, I arrived as promised. I wore a dark green dress, my hair simply styled, naturally falling over my shoulders. I arrived a bit early to wait for Jonathan at the door. Jonathan didn't disappoint me, he brought Emily along.
Good evening, Sarah.
Emily glanced at me smugly and walked ahead with Jonathan. People, when shameless, are invincible. I followed them to room 888, where most of the guests had already arrived.
Jonathan, who is this beautiful lady?
Emily, she's Sarah's best friend. I've been busy lately and didn't want Sarah to be bored, so Emily has been keeping her company. That's why she's here.
Since you're here, have a seat.
Emily sat down. It was supposed to be a dinner to welcome Jonathan's uncle, but I didn't see him.
Oh! Everyone's here? Sorry for being late.
The voice was so familiar. I looked up, and yes, it was David. And Michael was with him. How could this be? I felt like I was slowly turning to stone. If there was a crack in the ground, it would be my refuge. George glanced at him without saying a word. But Jonathan seemed uneasy when he saw Michael. Jonathan's lips tightened, and his eyes widened.
Uncle isn't late, we just left home a bit early today.
As long as I'm not late.
David sat down next to me.
Is this beautiful lady a member of the Smith family?
David, she's Jonathan's fiancée, Sarah.
Out of courtesy, I greeted him, but I didn't dare to look up at him, fearing that everyone would notice something unusual.
David, sit next to George.
No need, I'm fine here. Being too close to him, I'm afraid he might not have brought his medication and could end up in the hospital.
Cough, cough, let him sit wherever he wants. I'll say a few words first.
The room immediately quieted down, waiting for George to speak.
Everyone knows that David has been abroad, but he is still a Smith. I owe him something, and now that he's back, I want to make it up to him. So, don't compete with him. David, if you have any requests, just let me know.
How dare I have any requests? Just stay healthy.
David's words left everyone stunned, except George, who seemed to have expected it and didn't react much. David and Jonathan's father were half-brothers. David's mother was young and beautiful but came from a poor background and became George's concubine. Later, when David was young, his mother passed away. George's wife couldn't tolerate David living under her roof, so she sent him abroad to study. David had always held a grudge about this. Now, David's net worth was higher than George's, so the Smith family treated him with respect. Michael told me all this later.
All right, everyone, let's eat. David, I specially ordered braised pork for you. This restaurant's braised pork tastes just like your mother's, very special. Try it.
David raised his slender fingers, picked up a piece of braised pork with his chopsticks, and instead of eating it, he placed it in my bowl.
Here, future niece-in-law, you should eat this. You're so thin, you need to nourish yourself.
Everyone at the table sensed the tension and turned to look at me. At that moment, I wanted to run away.
I suppressed my inner panic and thanked David.
Too busy serving Emily to pay much attention.
Uncle, are you really staying for good?
Yes, I'm not leaving.
Although I didn't look up, I could feel David watching me from the corner of my eye.
Uncle, can you tell me about your experiences abroad?
I'd rather not, it might spoil everyone's appetite. It's not worth mentioning.
Nancy pouted, looking a bit disappointed. Although she didn't participate much in the family business, she was a smart girl.
Uncle, do you have a girlfriend?
This question was also of great interest to George, and not just him, the whole family perked up their ears to hear his answer.
Huh? Do I or don't I?
David slowed his speech, glancing at me as he spoke. I quickly lowered my head, shoveling a few bites of food into my mouth. I might have eaten too quickly and choked.
Niece-in-law, why don't you introduce someone to me?
Uncle, I'm afraid anyone I introduce wouldn't meet your standards. Besides, I only have one friend, Emily, and she already has a boyfriend, right, Jonathan?
Yes, I did that on purpose.
No problem, I'm not picky, as long as it's a woman. Of course, if she's as pretty as you, that would be even better. Hey, do you have a twin sister?
Seriously, Uncle, as long as it's a woman? Are your standards that low? That's not what I heard.
Nancy, stop pestering your uncle with so many questions.
Nancy was a journalist, which was probably why she was so inquisitive. It was quite odd, really, that she chose to be a journalist instead of enjoying her life as a young lady of the family.
David, since Nancy brought it up, I have to say something. You're not getting any younger, don't delay any longer. You're older than Jonathan by quite a bit, and you're his elder. Jonathan is already engaged, and you're still single. People might think there's something wrong with you.
Ha! It's not that there's something wrong with him, it's that he's too capable. I couldn't help but laugh, but my inadvertent laughter drew a sharp look from David, so I quickly lowered my head and continued eating.
We should introduce you to someone. David, how about the daughter of the Zhao Group's CEO? Sophia?
The girl you're talking about, I'm already acquainted with her, no need to trouble yourself.
You know her? That's even better.
Ha, not only do I know her, but we've also been together.
You rascal, behave yourself.
Hearing this, I became quite interested in Sophia. I had met her before, she was indeed beautiful, but I didn't know much about her. This seemingly harmonious family finished the meal, each with their own thoughts.
Sarah, next time don't bring unrelated people to family dinners.
Emily wasn't brought by me, I didn't even want to come myself. After the elders left, Nancy called us over, saying it had been a long time since we last met and she wanted to chat. I could tell she wanted to dig up some dirt on her uncle.
Sorry, Nancy, I need to head back home.
But Nancy persistently dragged me along.
Hey, what are you guys up to?
David pulled up in his car, rolled down the window, and asked us. After Nancy explained that she wanted to chat, we were invited to David's bar. I wasn't surprised that Nancy got into David's car, but Emily's actions seemed a bit off. She also got into David's car, opening the front passenger door. Who knows what she was planning? But just as she opened the door and was about to get in, David sent her to the back seat. At this point, I naturally had to go with Jonathan. Although he was reluctant, with Emily in the front, he had no choice but to drive and follow David to the bar. Once at the bar, Nancy directly told David that her boss wanted her to interview him, hoping for an exclusive. But David threatened to shut down her magazine, leaving Nancy a bit disappointed. Then Emily, completely disregarding Jonathan's presence, started making advances on David, pouring him a drink and wanting to toast with him.
I don't drink, how about Jonathan drinks this for me?
David walked over, pinched my chin with his long fingers.
What game?
David wanted to keep me as his mistress, threatening me with the video from that night. I had no choice but to comply. Shortly after I left, David sent me an address and a code, clearly the door lock password. I memorized it and deleted the message. That evening, I wore a long-sleeved tracksuit to cover my figure and arrived at the address Imperial Garden.
If you don't believe me, forget it. I guess I shouldn't have bothered with you.
Jonathan clearly had no patience to continue telling me the story.
Uncle, don't be mad. I just think what you said doesn't quite sound like me.
Then what do you think you are like?
I want to hear what you think I'm like, Uncle.
Jonathan leaned in and whispered a single word in my ear.
Wild.
I knew he wouldn't say anything nice.
Compared to Sophia?
As soon as I said it, I regretted it, wishing I could slap myself.
She's not as wild as you.
I didn't even know why I brought up that woman, but I was too curious about the relationship between her and Jonathan.
Is she prettier than me?
She's better looking.
Indeed, I thought so too.
Then why are you with me?
Maybe I was blind.
Oh my God, what am I doing, acting like his girlfriend? But I can't deny that I like him. However, I know he probably just finds me novel and treats me as a toy. Jonathan and I are destined to have no future. But at that moment, I suddenly remembered something else. Where did Jonathan and Emily go? Jonathan took out his phone and tapped a few times. The video that played was quite shocking. In the video, I saw that the loud noise I heard was Michael crashing his car into Jonathan's car repeatedly. It was quite violent. After that, Michael carried me to his car and then beat Jonathan up pretty badly. Seeing this scene made me shudder. Jonathan seemed a bit ruthless, no, more like a bit vicious.
David.
Jonathan's office door wasn't locked, and Michael barged in, startling me.
Get out!
Jonathan grabbed a magazine from his desk and threw it at Michael. Michael didn't seem inclined to leave, probably because he had something urgent.
You better have a good reason.
Jonathan said as he got up and left with Michael. The large office was now just me. I took the opportunity to observe Jonathan's office. Despite being in a bar, it was completely soundproof, and a row of bookshelves along the wall was filled with books. I wondered if he was genuinely studious or just putting on a show. On his desk was a folder. Out of curiosity, I opened it. Perhaps it was fate that led me to see this document. The folder contained annual development reports of my family's company and a copy of an agreement. The gist of it was that my family and the Smith family were collaborating on a new dock project. The Smith family provided the land, and the Johnson family funded it. However, after my family invested the funds, issues arose with the land, causing the project to halt. It couldn't be sold, leading to a financial crisis for my family. The bank demanded loan repayments, and we had to sell shares at a low price, but it still wasn't enough to cover the debts, pushing us to the brink of bankruptcy. In other words, my family's bankruptcy was closely tied to the Smith family. The agreement was signed by Jonathan's father. Did he know about this in advance and still went ahead with the collaboration, using the problematic land to trap us? After reading this, I felt panicked. If what I suspected was true, then the Smith family was my enemy. I wanted revenge, but I seemed powerless. If it were just Jonathan, it wouldn't be difficult, but his father was very shrewd and hard to deal with, not to mention the cunning George. In my panic, I paced back and forth in the office. David told me that George wanted to collaborate with him, and Jonathan was in charge of the project. Jonathan was already downstairs at the club.
I was so anxious I wanted to run away, but David remained silent, a slight smirk on his lips, as if he was waiting for a show, looking like a bystander.
I thought about finding a place to hide, but it was just a thought because before I could hide, Jonathan was already knocking on the door.
Uncle, are you there?
I held my breath, afraid that even a slight gasp would be heard by Jonathan outside the door. I finally experienced the feeling of a guilty conscience.
David was clearly not surprised by the knock. He didn't go to open the door but walked towards me instead.
How about we let him in?
I shook my head vigorously. David looked at me, a mischievous smile on his face, and shouted loudly,
Come in!
As Jonathan pushed the door open, David pressed me down, and we both fell onto the sofa. Ah! I was startled, indeed, by his sudden move. David used his strong back to shield me, kissing me passionately.
Sorry, I didn't know you were busy, Uncle. I'll wait for you in the lobby.
Jonathan, seeing the scene, tactfully turned and left immediately. It seemed he didn't notice me. Jonathan left for a long time before David finally let me go.
Uncle, you're so bad.
What? Don't you like it?
With that, he lowered his head and kissed my red lips again, fiercely and recklessly, then gradually more intensely. This man, who was like an eternal iceberg, had the most passionate and tender kiss in the world, making it hard for me to resist. But reason told me that Jonathan was still waiting for him. Using some strength, I pushed David away. David, with a roguish smile, waved his hand, telling me to wait for him to come back. He then grabbed a folder from the table and left the office. The quiet atmosphere in the office was really quite boring. I opened the office door, peeked through the gap to make sure no one was outside, and then slipped away. From that day on, I thought about investigating the collaboration between the Smith family and my company, but I had to start with Jonathan's father. How could I approach him? I needed to think about that. For several days, David didn't contact me. I didn't know if he was mad at me for running away that day or if he was too busy with work. More likely, he was driven mad by that idiot Jonathan. But my thoughts never ceased. In my mind, it was all about David. After waiting for a few days, what I got was the news that David was getting married. One night, Jonathan came back, still with Emily, but Jonathan had a bruise on his face from being hit by Michael. Seeing how close he and Emily were, it seemed that the incident with the homeless man hadn't affected them at all. Perhaps Jonathan didn't know? Jonathan came back to ask me to help him revise a proposal. Emily had revised it several times, but David was never satisfied. I took the proposal Jonathan handed me, quickly scanned through it, found the problem, and soon fixed it.
Yeah, Uncle's requirements are too strict. Emily even tried to use her charm, but Uncle didn't fall for it.
Do you think your uncle would be interested in a woman who has been with a homeless man?
Sarah! What nonsense are you talking about?
It's not hard to find out if I'm talking nonsense. There are surveillance cameras everywhere.
Jonathan was full of doubt.
Jonathan, don't listen to her nonsense. Just think about how to deal with your uncle. He's so hard to please.
You're right. No wonder Uncle is only getting married now at his age. Probably likes men and is just finding a woman for show.
Oh, your uncle is so handsome. If he likes men, what a waste of good genes.
Jonathan and Emily were discussing whether David liked men, and from Jonathan's words, I heard marriage. Marriage, David was actually getting married. At that moment, I couldn't take it, my heart was in turmoil like never before. I wanted to see him immediately, to ask Jonathan what was going on. So I volunteered to deliver the plan to David, using the excuse that I could explain and modify any unclear points.
It's good for someone else to take the blame instead of Jonathan.
Holding the plan, I headed straight to Imperial Garden. At this time, he should be there. As usual, I entered the code and opened the door. The lights were on, but the living room was empty. I heard noises from the study and walked towards it. The study door was ajar. Through the gap, I saw David speaking fluently in English on a video call with some foreigners.
Come in.
When I entered the study, David could tell I was troubled.
What's wrong, darling? Not happy?
I pouted and said nothing. Before coming, I was determined to ask him for the truth, but seeing him, I chose silence.
Haven't seen me for a few days, and you look like this the moment you see me? So eager? Sit down first. I'm in a meeting. I'll deal with you after.
Fortunately, the people in the video couldn't understand Chinese, or I would have been mortified.
Wow, Mr. Smith hiding a woman at home? Anyone who can freely enter Mr. Smith's house at this hour must be special. Should we continue tomorrow?
Enough nonsense, let's continue the meeting.
With David's command, the video call resumed its previous state. I sat on the study sofa, listening to their English, my eyelids growing heavy until I finally fell asleep. When I woke up, my phone had many missed calls from Jonathan. I ignored them, noticing a blanket over me and a pleasant aroma. I followed the scent to the dining room. David was setting dishes on the table. I couldn't believe he cooked them himself.
If I had more ingredients, I could make a full banquet. It seemed he wasn't exaggerating. I tasted a bite, and it was indeed good.
Uncle, your cooking is impressive. You should open a restaurant instead of a bar.
I have a restaurant. Haven't you been to Ocean View?
Ocean View is yours?
Ha! Just a small business, nothing worth mentioning. Feeling better now?
No. I finally mustered the courage to ask him. Are you getting married? To Sophia?
Is that why you're upset?
I had some doubts about this, but hearing it from David felt like a sentence.
You don't want me to marry Sophia?
I don't, but I can't do anything about it.
Who do you want me to marry then?
I wanted to say I wanted to marry him, but I knew it was a dream.
Seeing my unhappiness, David tried to cheer me up, promising to fulfill any request. Boldly, I asked for the Smith family.
Ha, the Smith family, quite ambitious. Is this Jonathan's idea? With his incompetence, he can barely hold on to his shares. Even if I gave him the Smith family, he couldn't handle it.
No, it's for myself. I gathered my courage and explained why I wanted the Smith family and why David had to help me. After all, he was getting married, and we might never cross paths again. David's eyes showed a hint of sadness but quickly returned to normal. I thought I might have said something wrong, upsetting him, but I didn't think I had. After dinner, I received a call from Nancy.
She wanted me to help her choose a wedding gift for Uncle. I agreed.
At the mall, I finally found Nancy, who was dressed mysteriously.
Because David refused to give me an exclusive interview, my boss assigned me to someone else, and the article had issues. I fear retaliation, hence the disguise.
I helped Nancy pick a high-end, customizable gift and left the mall. Unexpectedly, a group of men with knives cornered us, forcing us into a van. We had no idea where we were taken. Once in the van, we were bound, gagged, and blindfolded. The place smelled of dust and echoed, suggesting it was abandoned.
Boss, we brought them both since they were together.
Little reporter, explain that article.
Mr. Williams, it's not what you think. My editor changed my draft. It's not my writing.
I don't care. The interview was yours, and your name is on the article. Who would believe you had nothing to do with it?
While they were talking, I managed to reach my phone and long pressed the emergency call button. I had set David as my emergency contact but had never used it. I hoped it would work.
Mr. Williams, if you're angry, take it out on me. Let my sister-in-law go. She's innocent.
Boss, she's quite pretty. We can't let her go. Let's have some fun with her.
His words made me nauseous. I was worried, having been dragged into this mess by Nancy.
I don't want to hurt anyone. Little reporter, your article cost me $20 million. Pay up, and we're even. Otherwise.
20 million? She doesn't have that kind of money. If she did, she wouldn't be a reporter. I feared Nancy might agree, so I interrupted. Mr. Williams, can we think of another way? 20 million is too much.
Another way? Sure, you can pay with your body. But you're not worth that much. Your sister-in-law looks better.
Mr. Williams touched my face, and I bit his hand.
Ah! You little! How dare you bite me? He kicked me, and I fell.
Bang! The door burst open.
David! David! Brother? What's going on?
Uncle. David had arrived. He must have received my emergency call. It seemed they knew each other. We were saved.
Let them go! William, I said let them go. Didn't you hear me?
David, if I knew she was your niece, I wouldn't have done this. It's all a misunderstanding. Release her.
William realized Nancy's connection to David and released her.
As for this one, she's feisty. I like that. I'll keep her.
Before he could finish, David kicked him down, freeing me.
Are you hurt? Did they do anything to you?
I shook my head, adjusting my vision to see Michael had taken down the others, including Mr. Williams.
David lifted me, kissed my forehead, and handed me a knife. Who touched you? Go get your revenge.
Seeing my hesitation, he continued.
How come I never noticed you were so timid? You were quite bold when you got in my car.
David, please. I didn't know she was your woman. But your relationship is complicated. She's the sister-in-law of the little reporter, and you're the little reporter's uncle? So you two are?
None of your business.
No, David, look, there are so many people here, and my brothers are all watching. If you don't give us some hush money and just take the person away, aren't you afraid someone might accidentally spill the beans? With such a complicated relationship, it wouldn't sound good if it got out.
Ha, William, you're overthinking it. Because none of you are leaving here.
What? What do you mean?
Jonathan held my hand, and with a knife, he stabbed Mr. Williams in the thigh, blood splattering. Then Jonathan picked me up horizontally and called Nancy to leave the warehouse together. As we got into the car and drove away, I heard several blood-curdling screams, likely from Michael taking harsh actions against them. In the car, none of us spoke. I felt incredibly awkward knowing that Nancy was aware of our relationship.
Sweetheart, what are you thinking? Don't worry, Nancy is on our side.
Jonathan glanced at Nancy through the rearview mirror.
Yeah, I won't say anything. I just didn't expect, Sarah, that you would be with Uncle. So now should I call you sister-in-law or aunt?
Don't call me that. Uncle is about to get married. Didn't you just help him buy a gift?
Oh, right. I'm a bit confused. Uncle, please don't tell my dad about today, or he definitely won't let me be a journalist anymore.
Don't worry, I won't tell your dad, but I will shut down your magazine.
In addition, Jonathan promised to help her open a new magazine, giving her more freedom in her work. Jonathan dropped her off near the Smith residence, not too close. To my surprise, Jonathan actually took me back to his villa, throwing me out on the roadside before driving away. Well, he's about to get married, so treating me like this is normal, but I still feel heartbroken, like I've been dumped. In the following days, Jonathan and I had no further contact. I even suffered from insomnia every night, counting down the days. Finally, the day before Jonathan's wedding, I couldn't resist sending him a message.
I like you, it's an obsession, agreed, my selfishness born from love.
After sending it, I quickly retracted it within 2 minutes. That night, I received a dress from Michael, who reminded me to try it on carefully. I opened the box to find a white mermaid gown made of extremely smooth silk. Wearing this to the wedding might be a bit over the top, but considering the high-profile guests, it might actually be appropriate. After taking out the dress, I found a USB drive and a wedding invitation in the box. The USB contained evidence of Jonathan's father's crimes, enough to put him away for the rest of his life. Without hesitation, I handed the evidence to the police, letting them investigate and ensure he received the punishment he deserved. The next day, Jonathan's wedding day. I arrived at the wedding venue on time, with Emily still standing by Jonathan's side. Upon seeing me, Jonathan pulled his mother aside, saying he wanted to break off the engagement with me, and with Emily's embellishments, accused me of cheating and hiring someone to hit them. Jonathan had a dashcam recording of Michael hitting him that day. I couldn't avoid being mocked by Jonathan's mother, but she eventually agreed to Jonathan's proposal. I was also thinking about how to get away from his family, and they beat me to it, which suited me just fine.
I then asked the reporters present to witness that Jonathan and I had officially broken off our engagement.
The reporters took photos, and while today's headline would undoubtedly be David's wedding, our story would surely be the next big news. Jonathan seemed a bit surprised. He probably thought I would take the opportunity to extort something from him, but I agreed so readily. Then, Jonathan and Emily tried to drive me away.
What are you up to?
Oh, nothing. Just making sure we both get what we want.
I took out the invitation with David's signature and waved it in front of them, leaving them speechless. A beautiful woman then grabbed me, saying I was a VIP, and inexplicably took me to the makeup room. Several makeup artists surrounded me and started doing my makeup. I indeed hadn't put on any makeup today. I had been suffering from sleepless nights recently, and my complexion looked terrible. Wearing the dress Michael had sent me made me look even more out of place. Perhaps they had high standards for guests, so I decided to go along with it. After quietly waiting for the makeup to be done, I didn't even want to return to the banquet hall, but the same woman led me back there.
Nancy! You look so beautiful today. Let me take a picture of you.
At this moment, David appeared on the wedding stage. Before he could start speaking, a few people entered the banquet hall, walked to the stage, and presented an arrest warrant.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Smith. We're from the Commercial Crime Investigation Department, here for Robert.
David gestured for them to proceed. The officers walked over to Robert, handcuffed him, and took him away. The fact that an arrest warrant was issued so quickly meant that the evidence I had sent over played a crucial role. George understood this as well and had no better option than to instruct the lawyer to follow them.
This is outrageous.
George's expression was grim because everything was being broadcast live by the reporters present. The Smith family's stock price would undoubtedly fluctuate wildly today.
All right, that was a small interlude. Now the story truly begins. Thank you all for coming to my wedding.
There was no host for the wedding. David started it himself.
Let me introduce today's bride, my wife, Sarah.
As he spoke, the stage lights followed his hand's direction and shone on me.
What? Did I hear that right?
I was in a state of panic, my eyes wide open in shock. I never imagined I would be the protagonist today.
Come on up. You weren't shy in bed before, so why be shy now?
I stood frozen, my legs stiff and unable to move.
What does this mean? Sarah, so you weren't with Michael before? You were with my uncle? David, are you out of your mind?
Jonathan rushed over and grabbed David, still reeling from the shock of his father being taken away by the police.
Do you know who you're talking to?
David said as he turned and lightly pushed Jonathan, causing him to fall to the ground.
Grandfather! You have to stand up for me! He can't bully me like this!
Cough, cough, David, isn't this a bit inappropriate?
What's inappropriate? Grandfather, Jonathan just announced his breakup with Sarah, and the reporters all saw it.
Grandfather, you can't agree to this. How can you indulge my uncle like this? This woman cheated, and with my uncle, no less. If this gets out, it will be a disgrace to you.
Jonathan, shut up! Don't use grandfather as a shield. You know exactly what you've done.
I didn't expect Nancy to publicly oppose Jonathan in front of everyone. It seemed that David's investment in the magazine had paid off. She was smart and knew how to choose sides.
Enough, enough. I'm too old to understand your love stories. David can marry only if Sarah agrees.
With George's words, everyone's attention turned to me.
Sarah, you vile woman.
Someone, throw him out.
At David's command, several security guards swiftly came up and dragged Jonathan out of the banquet hall. David then took out a diamond ring he had prepared and knelt on one knee.
Sarah, you probably don't remember the first time we met when we were kids, but I will never forget it. If it weren't for you, I might not be in this world anymore. I've been looking for you for a very long time, and I finally found you. You are my destiny. With you by my side, everything is beautiful. Will you marry me?
I was in a daze, unable to comprehend what he was saying, as if I were in a dream I didn't want to wake up from, fearing that if I did, another woman would be standing next to David.
I pinched myself hard. It hurt. Clearly, I wasn't dreaming. The guests began to applaud and cheer. I looked at David and nodded seriously. As he placed the ring on my finger, memories took me back to my childhood.
Wait, little brother.
The end.